Here's the next project in my happy little life. I need to open this box up and make sure all the parts are in there. First things first, it's going to be hot today, so I moved an umbrella over here. Unfortunately, the darn string broke inside of it, so I've clamped it open. I hope it holds. They used a lot of nice packaging in here, but I would be careful unboxing this thing. These two are a little bit heavier. They have parts inside them. Safety first, the ground wire's been disconnected from both batteries. This is a pretty comprehensive job. I'm going to try to keep this video to only recording what's necessary. This right front wheel needs to come off. The truck is jacked up and it's on the wood blocks. The pressure is not on the floor jack. The lug nuts were all broken loose with the breaker bar. I like to have a bin handy for parts and tools. Otherwise I'll kick them all over the place and have to go find them. Big heavy tire and wheel. This little ABS sensor rivet or whatever it is needs to be undone to break the cable away from the fender well, and then all of the bolts that hold the plastic fender well in here need to be removed, and this whole thing is going to come out. That came out pretty easy, but my fender well is nearly in two pieces. It's also got a couple of blowouts here, so I'm going to see if they have a replacement online. If not, I'll try to do some repairs to this thing. By the way, this guy I just pulled out from the inside. It kind of deformed the part a little bit, but I think it'll go back in there all right. That's where we're going to be going soon. By the way, I used an 8mm socket to remove those fender well screws. The nuts on these clamps are 11mm socket. I was able to pop this clamp loose with a screwdriver, just twisting it in there. It's quite loose. I have the nut completely off of this one. Apparently I have to pull the exhaust back now somehow. I just took that big clamp all the way off. That big strap came off quite easily on this side. This one I'm having trouble with getting it out of the way. If I could move it that way or that way, I think this thing will twist up and come right out. I've been trying to pull on the exhaust with this strap, but it seems like that clamp is in the way. It's much stiffer than the big one. I can't get it to spread apart and stay spread apart. Alright, I just twisted that thing up. I think it might come out. I'm not able to record while I'm doing this. It's out. It just took a lot of twisting and turning and stuff to see what I can do about getting that other clamp out of the way. Next is installing this guy in there. Apparently the dipstick tube will be in the way. I took a photograph, so you should be able to see that bolt right there. I need to loosen somehow. I think when I put this thing back together, or put that brake in line there, I'm going to take these guys out. That should free up the massive exhaust pipe a little bit. This is what I used to get this dipstick tube bolt out. These extensions with a swivel and a 9/16 socket, and the two exhaust hanger bolts are right here. Those came out pretty easily. I think this movement will help a great deal. I spread this clamp apart and put these vice grips on this thing to hold it open. Unfortunately, I'm still not able to slide it up and over this part. I was hoping I could, but this still might help me out a little bit. I have that thing resting in there. I'm not sure what I need to do next. Try to engage this end first and then slide this over. I don't know. I'm going to play around with it a little bit. I just hooked the exhaust bracket up on the bottom to hopefully get this business to align better. I've got this clamp on here loose. I've left it loose. Now I got to get this part to align properly and get that clamp on properly. I got the other clamp on there. I sprayed a shit ton of that whatever it's called oil. Aerocroil, the oil that creeps, in the hopes that as I tighten these I'm going to alternate back and forth and hope everything kind of adjusts and everything slides into place. There's just no way of knowing if this thing is mated properly and if that one's mated properly. I'm done in there. I guess you just gotta hope those things mated up properly and there won't be an exhaust leak. That would suck real bad. I just put the transmission dipstick tube bolt back in, so everything way underneath is done. That's done. I think I'm going to call it quits for today, or I may go look at my fender well thing, see what I need to do to repair it. It's getting extremely hot. For $53.12, I will not be repairing this broken out big piece of plastic. It's early Saturday morning, a little after 7 a.m. I'm ready to get at this again. I'm pretty excited because yesterday I was reading the manual and section 3 said for kits 55225, which I have, skip to section 4. I read that as going to step 4 in section 3, and there's all these pages of section 3 working down under the truck on the transmission. But that's not the case. I get to skip right to section 4. How about that? I just pried this plastic retainer up with a screwdriver. It's this one. It's close to this big slot here. This is the contents of that bag. I'm going to mount this solenoid with this bolt, nut, and washer. This uses a metric bolt, so a 10mm socket and wrench on the bottom to tighten that thing up. This is the smaller diameter hose in that kit. I'm going to have to go cut these because they're not cut at perfect 90-degree angles. That hose is going from down here and routing up to port 2 on this solenoid. The larger ID hose is connected to port 1, and I guess it's just going to rest here for a while. I'm trying to remove the drive belt right now. I have my breaker bar inserted into the tensioner, but where I'm at right now, I can only move this thing that far before I hit the frame over here. In order to get the breaker bar indexed over 90 degrees from where it is now, I hit this bracket right here. So I think I'm going to have to remove this bracket. People online say you don't have to do that. I got a ratchet on here, but there's nothing to grab onto. Maybe if I put a pipe on it or something I can do this. And there's my piece of pipe. It's not quite long enough, but I can do this. Now, is that enough to get the belt off? I'm going to have to stop recording because I can't do this with one hand. I'm making progress here. I think I'll be able to get it off. For me, it's come to this. Got about a mile of this thing out, but I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get it off of the pulley down there. My solution is that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get another one back in there, so I'll have to figure that out later. There we go. I'll see if I can sell this guy on eBay. Just needs to be welded back together. The vacuum pump is assembled onto the bracket. I used blue Loctite on these 3 bolts. You need a 10mm socket to tighten these up. I was able to wiggle that thing into place. Now I have to get these 4 bolts to align going through this direction into the nutserts into this heavy bracket. That was fun. Another kind of tough install. It's not that bad. I found a 13mm deep socket on the 2 upper bolts. Worked quite well. It worked on the bottom ones also. You can't even see them down there, but I did switch to a standard depth socket to tighten the 2 on this end. Alright folks, the drive belt is installed. It was pure hell getting this drive belt on here. Partly because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I've never done it before. What you have to do is feed the belt down in, and there's a little gap right up in there. You have to turn the belt sideways and shove it up in there, and that's kind of your starting point. I thought that you had to feed it around the fan, old school, like on my '65 Chevy truck I had decades ago, but you don't. It does not have to go around the front of the fan. I got very lucky, and my friend Julian came over, and after feeding it around the fan, he's smart enough to figure out that it doesn't need to do that, and he assisted me the whole time. And actually we started up here feeding it down this way, and he was able to get it through that little slot down below. From there we released the tension on the tensioner and were able to get the belt routed all the way through. While it was helpful to have this routing diagram in the Banks manual, this isn't very helpful. With the supplied drive belt, route the belt as shown in figure 25. I'll use a breaker bar or ratchet on the belt tensioner to allow the new belt to slide into place. After the drive belt fiasco, thank you again, Julian. I couldn't have done it without you. I've got this vacuum line hooked up. I ran it all the way over here. I suppose it could have just come down here, but I used the full length of the hose that they supplied. Next up, I need that little fuse tap thing out of this bag. Fuse number 50 needs to come out. It's the very end one right here. I had to use a screwdriver to assist pushing this thing on. It was a very tight fit. It's 7 a.m. Sunday morning. Back at it again, I think. Well, I might have said this yesterday morning. The heavy lifting is done. Exhaust brake is installed. The vacuum pump is installed. The solenoid is installed. I think I just got some wiring to do now. This is all the parts I have left to install. I need to put a notch in the cover here, and also a notch under the cover where this rests. I used a side cutter to cut the notches and then took a round file to this. And I'm making sure that the wires are absolutely not pinched. I just moved the vacuum hose that I had over here. I moved it to up here and routed it straight over to the vacuum pump. I had to shorten it by that much. I was getting too much stuff piled up on here, as you'll see in just a moment. This module is going to mount here on top of the fuse box cover with these Velcro strips. I don't really care for that. I think I'm going to improve that later, but for now, to get going, I'll go ahead and use that. That plug is going to plug into that thing, and then I can route this cable. That's on there pretty good. I put it on there, stuck it on there, and then put pressure from this side. They said to put pressure on it for 1 minute, so I did that. Make sure you leave enough room over here to be able to turn your fuse cover securing knob. It seems like kind of a shitty connection to me. Let's see if I can tie wrap this down somewhere. It seems like it could vibrate and break loose after a while. I just put a small dab of hot melt down here to hold this thing to keep it from vibrating. I feel a little better about that. The extra male terminal here, I put electrical tape on it and just tie wrapped it back. The fuse cover is secured. Click. The next challenge was finding this C108 connector. Nobody really explained that. And I am under the driver's side door, laying down, looking up at the transmission. That is the connector disconnected right there. It was riveted, plastic riveted onto this, or it has these little plastic, whatever they are, serrated plug things I can't show you. Here's my new harness from the brake system. Fed it down from the top. Again, I'm on the bottom under the driver's side door. I fed it down from up there. Alright, the harness is connected underneath here. This was another sucky job, but it's done. There's a very distinct click when those connectors connect. I had a lot of trouble with one of them, but finally got it. I tie wrapped the stuff up there so it won't wiggle around as I'm driving. Now back up to top side, although I found this ground strap thing under here disconnected. I don't know where it goes. I'll have to try to figure that out. It's connected to the sheet metal bodywork on one side. This Banks cable is going to plug into this little wire harness that came that's on the solenoid here. Snap. This cable is connected to this cable and it's tie wrapped to the truck harness. Comes from the solenoid. It's tie wrapped along there. It's all part of this Y connection over here. And feed this harness through that slice. This piece of harness is now poked through that grommet down there. It's hard to see. Here's where we stand at the moment. This connector is connected to the onboard truck OBD connector. The 8-pin connector that came through the firewall harness is connected to this 8-pin connector from the OBD. On this model of truck, they give you a choice between two locations to mount the switches. One is here, which seems to be blocked by the steering wheel. The other one is here. I'm going to go for this one. This panel had to come off first. There's 2 screws on the bottom. Then this guy comes off. I'm going to unibit 2 half-inch holes in this panel. I had to drill half-inch holes for the switches to fit through there. The switches need to fit through this also. That is not a half-inch hole. After I drilled the holes in the decals to half-inch, I set them on here and put the switches on and just marked it with tape so I could get the decals on there nice and even. I believe this is my last connection. Now I just need to tuck all this business up under the dash. I guess there was 2 more connections that needed to be made. That one and that one. I believe I'm ready for my first startup since installing the brake system. Everything looks good in here. Everything looks good under the hood. This thing has some sort of warm-up feature, which I don't think I need in California. See that arm in there? Upon a cold start, the brake valve should close, which apparently assists in warming up the truck. So I'm going to give this thing a cold start. Let's see what happens. Unfortunately, there will not be a driving test today, because I'm waiting for a new inner fender well to arrive here.